Parents often ask me, when should my child start doing selective exams? And honestly, it's not as simple as the earlier the better. See, doing 4 exam papers too early on can actually backfire. If your child just finished the OC test in year 4, jumping straight into weekly selective exams isn't really going to help very much, as they haven't even learned most of the concepts yet. The real magic happens when practice is done at the right time. Around term 4 of year 5 or even the summer holidays, leading up to year 6, that's where every test generally makes more of a difference for the students that we see anyway. They've built the foundations up, they understand the question types, and now the practice has more benefit. My name is John, and I'm the founder of Bings Academy. For the past 10 years, we have helped students reach their academic goals through online one-on-one tutoring. So let's talk about why timing matters, even when it comes to practice tests, and what too early can really look like, and how to plan your child's selective preparation properly. The problem with doing it too early is that students often have not learned the concepts or are familiar with the higher level of difficulty from selective to OC. It's a very drastic shift. The writing component is also an additional example as well. With so many writing text types, if I got you to do an advice sheet 1 week and then you go to your STTC or your weekly selective trial test, and the following week you do a diary entry, it is very difficult for a student or a parent to recognize whether they know it, if they're good at writing, if they just base it off that score that week, or if they're only good for that text type. Their score for an advice sheet could vary greatly compared to what they've done for the diary entry, depending on the question that they're given that week. They might be stronger in that section, or they might be weaker in that instance, which could skew a lot of the insight. If they spend 10 months or even 12 months to go through the different writing text types to ensure they're familiar with it, then it doesn't really matter what writing question that's provided, as they'll generally know what is to be expected when it comes to set A's marking criteria. If they do writing tests when they have no familiarity, there can be very minimal benefit since they haven't really done it before. With 15 marks for set A, the criteria focus on content, form, including structure and organization, vocabulary and style, including the level of formality, and this is linked to assessment objectives, or AOs, 1 to 4. Essentially, this means that if the student does not answer the question specifically or know what is in that particular text type, it is very difficult for them to earn the highest marks for set A, which is 15 marks. The remaining marks that are in set B are in the spelling, grammar, and sentence structure. I have gone through the marking scheme for the writing in a previous video for this very reason. Therefore, when students have not covered that text type that's given to them for the very first time, it is highly unlikely for them to do well in set A's marking criteria, but they can still do well in set B. But since set A is worth 15 marks and set B is worth 10 marks, it's very difficult for them to do well overall from a score perspective if they're not entirely sure what's going to be in that writing text type. For students who are in the middle of year 5 or just looking to do those weekly tests, they may technically know the concepts that are assessed if they're very switched on and have worked hard for the OC preparation, which have a lot of topics that can carry forward to the selective study. However, concepts and knowledge does not always grow at the same speed with exam maturity. Decision-making under test time pressure can vary, and understanding multi-step mathematical reasoning problems or maintaining focus doing 2 tests back-to-back with a small break in between and then another 2 tests back-to-back is not always easy. That is why I believe exam practice around the term 4 of year 5 or the start of year 6 is generally the ideal starting point to help you solidify the concepts and the skills first. The occasional test is absolutely fine. Doing a set of questions timed is fine as well, but generally not weekly exams. Another reason is because if students start preparing way too early by doing weekly exams or even daily practice tests, it can lead to burnout or just plateauing, which essentially means that they can peak too soon and lose motivation by the actual test comes around. Students can work hard for a short period of time, but if they're working at a very fast pace for over 8 months or 12 months, it's very hard. A lot of parents think starting and doing selective style exams, earlier it is, the better it is. But what usually happens is students can peak too soon. They hit the best performance months before the real test and then lose momentum or motivation when the test actually happens. I've seen this so many times. A student who was scoring in the 90s by the end of year 5 suddenly drops off by the time May comes around when they're in year 6. They want to make sure that you perform the very best at the exam day, not before it or after it. Others plateau, meaning they can keep doing weekly exams but stop improving because they're just repeating the same habits over and over again. That's why timing is everything. You can always start doing exam style practice when they've actually learned most of the concepts, which for most people, in my opinion, is that end of year 5, early year 6 period. It can also save money too if you do it at these times. If money is not an issue and you can afford weekly tests, then just do it early. As we know that scientifically, time management is largely improved, not during tutoring classes, but more so when doing actual time problems and exams. In tutoring, one-on-one can really help with understanding the concepts that still lack or working in certain areas that need sharpening. If a student or parent can afford to do both concurrently, it's totally fine to start it a bit earlier. But what I mentioned is that generally a few months prior to May is that sweet spot. They can even start in February or May of this year if they're starting in year 5. Although the best return on investment, I would say, is doing it now as term 4 is about to begin for students in year 5 already, or who are preparing to get into year 6 next year. Although you don't want to only start in April next year, since there's not enough time to necessarily guarantee you can fix up any of the burning issues or time management problems by that stage. It does, however, depend on the student, as different students can require different amounts of preparation and time horizons. Some students can get into the top selective high schools like James Roos with only a few months of preparation, while others may require a couple of years. As a PSA, our Selective 2026 Horizon program, which is a completely free 10-week program where students will do all 4 exams on the selective test each week, will kick off again next year. After a successful 2025, we want to make it bigger and better for the students next year. Scores are still going to be provided immediately after completing the test, and weekly rankings will be given. We will start this from the 6th of February 2026 to the 11th of April 2026. Again, just like what we did earlier this year, it is free for all students in year 6. We're very serious about preparing for the exam, so only sign up if you can commit to the entire 10 weeks. Any students who don't do the test each and every week will be kicked off the program, so we can save the spot and give it to someone else. This is for the year 7 entry exams, so only designed for students in year 6 next year. We don't make it a one-day event like the ASAT exam that pre-uni runs. We make it 10 weeks so we can recognize students can improve over time, but it really varies depending on the day. Although I personally like pre-uni's ASAT exam, and I encourage all of our students to also do it, as they have such a large sample size, considering we only had 130 students who did it on average for the Selective Horizon program with us earlier this year. They have a couple thousand. But as mentioned, our results are in some ways can be seen as a more reliable indicator, despite it being a smaller sample size, as you can see their results over time as an average. We don't know if in the actual selective exam is in May, whether they'll likely perform what they did in the ASAT exam, or if they're going to be weaker, stronger, or one of the more average weeks of the Selective Horizon program, or a STTC equivalent. Although for people who are time poor, STTC is a great option, as it is just a one-day commitment, so it's quite accessible when it comes to the ASAT exam or options like that. Remember, practice exams that are not timed so strictly can always be done, and in fact should be done quite often. This is not an excuse to not practice or revise from questions aligned to what will appear, but just a recommendation of what I would do personally in terms of timeline that has worked for the majority of the students that we teach here at Bings Academy that have made it in. Keep in mind, this is just a rough estimation, given the test is in May. The period of time between the OC and the selective test, and from our experience helping students prepare for this test. Please adapt it accordingly to your own specific scenario or situation. And what may work for you could also be very different to what may work for someone else. And although it is very applicable for most of our students, I recognize that every student is different and they may need more or less time in terms of exam practice compared to others. If I miss something out, or you disagree, or you agree with anything that I've mentioned in today's video, please put it down in the comments below. If you want me to cover another topic that you're curious about, let me know as well. If you haven't liked or subscribed already, what are you doing? Make sure you hit that button, as it really does support us a lot. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.